In this class, you're going to be introduced to two theoretical frameworks when working with technology in the classroom. The one that Angelo and I are going to introduce is what is called technological pedagogical content knowledge. And as you can see, this is a combination of technology knowledge, pedagogical knowledge, and content knowledge in order to form a framework to adequately integrate technology into a classroom in an effective way. So before we begin, we must ask one essential question. Is technology use in the classroom helpful, or is all technology use in a classroom helpful? This is a question that we would like to pose to you and see what you think about this question. In order to give you a brief summary of Tpck, we have decided, or we have made this infograph to help you see how technology, pedagogical knowledge, and content knowledge all overlap to form what is called Tpck. You can see that two of the knowledges interact to form what can be called technological content knowledge, technological pedagogical knowledge, and pedagogical content knowledge. But it is the intersection of all three of these that makes Tpck what it is and why it is unique. Before we begin, we need to define what are these different types of knowledge. To begin with, we're going to start with technology knowledge. Technology knowledge is knowledge about standard techniques such as books, chalk, and blackboard, and more advanced technologies such as internet and digital video that may be useful within the classroom. Of course, there are significantly more technological tools that are available today to teachers. As you can see, this framework was initially designed and formed in the mid-2000s, which means that there has been a lot of technological development that has come about that can be used in the classroom to make it so much more easier. This is especially true when it comes to tablets, laptop computers, many different apps, and technology that helps teachers interact with students, which is much of the technology that we have learned about in this class. Pedagogical knowledge is knowledge about the process and practices or methods of teaching and learning and how it encompasses, among other things, overall educational purposes, values, and aims. This is the information that we have learned in a lot of our entry-level education classes. I especially am thinking about growth and learning, where we learned a lot about the effective teaching strategies that you can use and how learning takes place. This is separate from the individual learning within certain subjects and more just about how students learn in general and how teachers can be effective teachers. The third aspect of Tpck is content knowledge. And this is the knowledge about the actual subject matter that is to be learned or taught. And this is the knowledge that we accumulate by taking the courses in our subject area that are maybe outside of education. And this knowledge is necessary because this is the subject that we are going to be teaching our students. As I mentioned before, each of these types of knowledge interact with each other directly. So to begin, I'm going to introduce pedagogical content knowledge. Pedagogical content knowledge is knowing the different ways of how to teach a content, the content area that you're working in, and the different ways of teaching. This is what is learned in our content methods course that we will be taking because not all teaching strategies are useful for the different types of content. Therefore, certain methods work better with certain content. And as described by the authors or the founders of this theory, is pedagogical content knowledge is knowing what teaching approaches fit the content, and likewise knowing how elements of the content can be arranged for better teaching. In order for you to understand what I'm going to be talking about in this lesson, or the example that I'm going to use, is I'm going to talk about an effective way of teaching mental math. or I'm going to be using the lesson on mental math to describe all these different things and how they work together in Tpck. And because I am not a math teacher and I don't understand exactly the most effective way to teach math and the content, I am going to attach a link in the next slide. You will see that you will be able to see how one math teacher, his pedagogical content or his pedagogy of how to teach mental math, and you will be able to watch that video or see the attachment to watch that video so that you have a better understanding of pedagogical content knowledge. The second knowledge in Tpck that I'm going to introduce is technological pedagogical knowledge. And what this is it's knowing how to properly integrate technology into your classroom, or as the author said, knowing the existence, components, and capacities of various technologies as they are used in teaching and learning settings, and conversely, knowing how teaching might change as a result of using particular technologies. The basis of this is what we have learned in this class that we are taking. Dr. Carr has introduced us to a range of technologies that is useful in teaching, and it is our job to know or to learn how to properly integrate technology into our classroom, because as we have learned, not all technology is useful, and just using technology doesn't necessarily mean that it is beneficial to the students, especially as we have learned that maybe using technology that is low on the Bloom's taxonomy is not very useful because the students aren't really learning very much or using their brain very much, and it is our jobs as teachers to try to introduce or use technology in a more effective way to get the students working at a higher level on the Bloom's taxonomy. The last aspect of Tpck is technological content knowledge. And what technological content knowledge is knowing about the technology that can be used to teach specific content. It's knowing about the manner in which technology and content are reciprocally related. As we will, or as you may have learned or searched in your research area, there may be specific apps and programs that are designed specifically for a specific subject in order to help teachers effectively teach the content that they're working with, right? Or it can be technology that is used within a specific subject. So maybe there's a type of technology that can be used by all subjects, but there tend to be apps or technology that can be used that is more beneficial for specific different subjects. In my example, I'm going to introduce an operational math application that was designed specifically to help students with math. And in particular, it is very helpful when it comes to mental math, because as you have seen before, the one thing nice about doing mental math is that you don't have to write out the math equations and follow all the directions on paper, because we don't always have a piece of paper and pencil to do that. Therefore, when we use mental math, it is possible for us to do a math equation in our head and not have to use paper. But the question may be is, how do we get our students in our classrooms to practice doing math equations in their head and not being tempted to write out that equation on paper and using pen and paper? And that's where this application comes in handy, is because what it does is it introduces students to, it provides several math equations for the students to solve, and they're doing it in a timely manner where they're trying to escape or trying to accomplish the goals that are set before them, and it pushes them to do it in a hurry and do it in their mind so that they're not trying to write it out or using a paper on the side. The goal is for them to use it in their head, and therefore is very essential or is very important to mental math and very useful for teaching mental math. in a way that you couldn't use it in a classroom, or that you can't do it in just a typical classroom without technology. So technology helps teaching this specific content. So you might be asking yourself why do we need Tpck? Because it seems like these three circles seem to interact individually with each other very well. But we do need a more encompassing theory, because sometimes just using them on an individual basis doesn't really work. But it's when we apply them all together that it works really well. So as you can see, is not all technology used in the classroom is helpful. Even if it is content-based, maybe you have some technology that you're going to use to teach something, but it still may not be very useful, or just any math equations that you do over and over and over might not be very beneficial to the student, or using the different quizzes that we use at the end of class, as we have talked about before, may be very low on Bloom's taxonomy and just not very helpful. The second thing is that technology may not be properly used in a classroom. So just because you use it, or maybe you're like, oh, I'm going to use this app, but you don't really know how to properly use the app. Or maybe you're not, you're only using part of the functions that doesn't really help it use. So in order to incorporate that, you need a more encompassing and broad understanding of when an appropriate time to use technology is, and in what ways you would use technology to teach a specific thing. And technology use may not be appropriate for the content. So maybe if you're just using technology, like, hey, some history teachers use technology to teach this, or some math teachers use technology, I've heard them to use that technology to teach this type of math, but you didn't really do it in an effective way, or maybe you're doing it in a very wrong way or a more complicated way for students. It just may not be appropriate and may not be helpful or beneficial to you as a teacher or your students. Now we come to Tpck. So what is Tpck? Tpck is knowing how to incorporate the right technology into a lesson in order to teach the content in a more effective way. The argument is that if you didn't use this technology, you wouldn't be able to teach it as well as using the technology. Therefore, technology is beneficial, or even more beneficial than not using it. The authors describe it as the quality teaching, or made the statement that quality teaching requires developing a nuanced understanding of the complex relationships between technology, content, and pedagogy, and using this understanding to develop appropriate context-specific strategies and representations. So, if we're going to talk about mental math is first taught to your students, as the teacher did in the video that I provided. The next thing is, it's possible because this teacher knows how to teach math, and he himself is very aware of mental math and knows it very well. Therefore, he has a high content knowledge. Now, the question is he could just teach mental math to his students and give them a piece of paper and just tell them to try to fill out to do these problems on a piece of paper in their head, and maybe write down the answer and just see if they can do that. But as a teacher, you don't know how long it's taken them for each question, or whether or not they're actually using notes somewhere else or writing it somewhere else. So therefore, the teacher can't control the time aspect of doing mental math. Therefore, this is where technology comes in and makes it a more effective way of teaching teaching mental math. Because this app is specifically designed to put a time limit on students in solving these math problems. Therefore, and it prevents them from having paper to write down the math problems on paper. As a result, using the app is an effective way of using Tpck, because it is using technology in a way that that reaches all three things, where it's effective for the content and for the pedagogy and how to teach this content, and it does it in a better way that you could do than not using, or it teaches it in a better way than not using technology in the classroom. And this is why Tpck is so unique. And it should be it should be said that Tpck is just not suitable for some lessons. I mean, sometimes technology can hurt a lesson, or technology is not beneficial to teaching something, and you can just teach it better without technology, and that is very understandable, and it's very true. So teachers should not be pressured to always use technology when teaching something, and therefore that's what Tpck is arguing, is that sometimes it's not worth it, or it's not better. You're not doing your students a service by using content, and that technology is only beneficial to students when it's not only incorporated correctly into a lesson, but it's also correctly teaching the lesson, or teaching it in a more effective way than in person. And it's directly related to the content. So Tpck is a very great theoretical approach to using technology in the classroom that I think many teachers would benefit from using and understanding, because without it, you couldn't still be using, maybe you're not using technology when you could be using technology, or maybe you're using technology in an ineffective way.